We're talking today with Ernest Cascini of Grand Rapids, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, Ernie himself served in the U.S. Coast Guard, but his father also was a Coast Guard veteran from the World War II era, and he's going to talk a little bit about his father's career and his own life as the basically military brat in a Coast Guard family, and then get into his own story. So, so let's begin at the beginning of the beginning. Basically, as far as you know, where and when was your father born?
He was born in Schenectady, New York.
Okay.
And his parents were Italian immigrants, and he enlisted in the Coast Guard. Oh, well actually, he was enlisted. I don't know if he enlisted back then or not, but he was in the New York National Guard, and then he enlisted in the Coast Guard. Okay. And then,
do you have an idea of roughly when he was born?
Oh, he was born about 1910.
Okay.
And that was that was how it happened. He back then if you were going to go to one of the other military academies, you had to be appointed by somebody, and there was the perception, whether it was true or not, I really don't know, that you had to have a connection, and he didn't. So that's why he went with the Coast Guard, to be perfectly honest with you, because it was strictly just a exam you took, and they took the people off of that, and that's what happened.
And do you have an idea of kind of when he joined the New York National Guard, or how long he was in it?
Well, he was, believe it or not, he was in it from the age of 16.
Yeah.
And his first, they were doing a reenactment of the Battle of Cowpens, that's when he first became aware that the Coast Guard existed. I mean, I don't know if Schenectady is basically very landlocked in Albany, it's Albany, New York, if you want to think of it. And there were some military officers who were involved in the reenactment, and one of them was a Coast Guard officer, and that's how he first knew about it. How that went on from there, I don't know what the details are, but I do know that that was his first introduction to the Coast Guard.
Okay.
If not the military, it was the Coast Guard, and that was it.
Okay. And then roughly when does he join the Coast Guard?
About 1929 is when he enlisted. He obviously enrolled in the Coast Guard Academy about 1931, and he graduated in 1935. So.
All right. And do you have any sense of when he was an enlisted man, what he did? Was he?
Yeah, he was a gunner's mate. What he did was basically he was stationed in North Carolina. He was chasing rum runners, is my basic understanding of what he did. Yep. And the way he tells the story, he was encouraged to, which presumably he was doing satisfactorily or a good job. He was encouraged to take the exam to get into the Coast Guard Academy. He did, and I guess he did well enough to get in. Graduated in 1935. He was the adjutant of the Corps, if that means executive director of the Corps, sort of second in command of the Corps, and that basically I think he graduated with a 4-year degree in engineering of some kind.
Yeah, well, that's likely, the service academies, you're getting a degree.
Right, exactly.
So he's actually going through the Coast Guard Academy at that point.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
So he is not just an officer candidate school like the 9-month version of things or whatever.
No.
This is the full thing.
This is the full thing.
Yeah.
It was actually modeled after, West Point and Annapolis and that kind of thing. So, that was kind of what it was.
Now, at this point, was he married or was he single or?
He wasn't. He did the same thing I did. He didn't get married until he got commissioned, and that's the same thing I did. Yeah, he was single then, and after he graduated, he got married and, you know, went on from there. And my mother was a dutiful spouse of a military person. So wherever he was stationed, she went.
Right.
So.
Okay. Now, he's got, if he finishes in 35, he's got about 6 years before we're officially in World War II, although there's anti-submarine warfare going on even before we're officially in.
That's true. And another thing a lot of people don't know is the Coast Guard was actually made a part of the Navy a year before that.
Mm-hmm.
So technically, the Coast Guard was, when they say, you know, the Navy was fighting the war in the Pacific and the Army was fighting the war in the Atlantic, not really true, because the Coast Guard was the Navy. It was the same thing. And actually, approximately a year before Pearl Harbor, the President made the Coast Guard a part of the Navy, which supposedly he can only do in time of war.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty much it. And I even have some, he was involved in, he was in Greenland,
Mm-hmm.
and Greenland was a protectorate of Norway.
Or Denmark, I think.
Or Denmark, one of the one of those countries, and they, because they were taken over by the Germans, passed the protectorate along to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that the Coast Guard did, along with having weather stations and essentially fighting the Germans in Greenland, was to maintain a weather station and keep the Germans from maintaining a weather station there, to help their submarine fleet.
Right.
And actually, with all of the fjords and stuff, they even had some plans. I'm talking about the Germans now. Had some plans, apparently, to invade Greenland, but then they thought, well, why? I mean, it wasn't worth it to them. But they actually captured some German weather stations before Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some pictures that I have, and I probably have them somewhere. You know, because I inherited them, so to speak, and I have them somewhere. So he actually, the Coast Guard or the Navy was fighting the Germans for all intents and purposes before Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, even the Reuben James,
Mm-hmm.
that was supposedly torpedoed by a German, and well, it was. So I mean, that was a Navy. I mean, that was so.
But it was on basically. It was engaged in anti-submarine warfare and convoy escort.
Essential. Well, you know, I don't know that it was involved in convoys.
Oh.
I don't know that exactly, but it was certainly involved in anti-submarine warfare, such as it was then.
Yeah.
And it wasn't to the sophistication that it is now. That's for sure.
Oh, sure. But anyway, but at that point, I mean, the Americans were already, to some extent, doing some convoy escort and things like that, close to the United States coastline.
We also on Lend-Lease, my understanding is we lent, whatever, the British 50 quote-unquote obsolete destroyers or to do convoy duty.
Right.
So they were essentially off. We're already fighting the Germans.
Oh, sure. But yeah, but that's sort of going on, and this kind of fits into that, and your father's Greenland part fits into that.
Sure.
Okay. Now, once we're actually in the war proper, what kinds of service did he do?
That was always kind of interesting too, because he had been involved in the Greenland thing. He was also an expert in anti-submarine warfare, such as it existed. Mm-hmm. And one of the first things, before we could pump out DEs. Now it's questionable whether how many we were pumping out anyway, because we were more interested in the Navy was more interested in the war in the Pacific. Let's put it that way. But a thing called PCs, which were 173-foot steel-hulled subchasers, were built. I honestly don't know how many were built, but they didn't have names because the Navy didn't figure that they were significant enough to have names, which was kind of interesting. But
how much, a DE is a destroyer escort, how much larger is a destroyer escort than one of the PCs?
It would be about 300 feet.
Yeah, okay.
Let's just say. And if you're talking about size and displacement, it's probably 4 times the displacement.
Right.
And that's a destroyer escort. A DD, or a full-blown destroyer, is larger.
Yeah.
50 feet larger, 25 foot larger than a DE, and it also is a fine convoy vessel. But an awful lot of vessels that had other purposes were used as DEs and DDs. Actually, the Coast Guard had a bunch of Treasury class cutters, which were 327 feet, and they were painted gray, and they did convoy duty. Right. So, and the Bibb and the Campbell and the Alexander Hamilton and all those Treasury class, and the reason they're called Treasury class vessels is because they were named after the secretaries of the Treasury, and of course Coast Guard was part of the Treasury Department.
Now, did your father wind up in PCs, or?
Yeah, he actually, because he was an expert he went around the country. His main duty station was at the boatyards, who built the PC 556 and 557, 558. And to see how they were doing it and that they were doing it properly. He also kind of, the Michigan connection is kind of interesting. Defoe Shipbuilding built lots of them, and they had a better way of building them, where they would actually, you can't do this, I mean, quote unquote. They would actually build the hull upside down, because, and believe me, when I was in the Coast Guard, I learned how to weld. Welding downhand is a lot easier than upside down and up. Trust me, it is. And but the shipbuilders on the East Coast who had built yachts before the war didn't do it that way. Wouldn't do it that way, and kind of refused to do it that way. And my dad used to say, "God damn it, they're building yachts," and that's not what we want. Not what we wanted. We wanted PCs, quick. And
so where was this shipyard in Michigan?
Bay City.
Okay.
It was Defoe Shipbuilding, and actually Defoe Shipbuilding, when I was on active duty in the 70s, was still in business. Was still building ships. A lot of people don't know that, but they still were. And the last 2 vessels they built were oceanographic vessels for Woods Hole, but they were Navy contracts to be manned by civilian crews. Therefore, Coast Guard inspectors, aka me, and Navy inspectors both inspected them. Because it was both a Navy vessel and a civilian vessel was going to be manned by civilians. That was the theory.
Okay, so kind of wind back around. So he's going around and he's involved with the production of the PCs. And like he also went into Michigan to Detroit Diesel, because they were diesel powered, and did whatever you have to do to make sure that they were up to
specification and thus and so. And like a lot of things in U.S. industry, it wasn't that simple to just be making Fords one minute and be making tanks the next. It took some work to do it, but it could be done, and that's what he did. So, plus other things. For example, one of the things that the PC boats did is they escorted U.S. vessels along the East Coast. They were also helped by French, I forget what they call them, were corsairs. They were essentially French PCs. They were, except they had names. And of course, France had fallen, and the British had bombed the French fleet. And it was some question whether or not they were on our side or whose side they were on. It was my dad's responsibility, because he actually was on the PC 556, to make sure to determine which side these guys were on, and so he did, and so he was on PC 556, but he wasn't technically the commanding officer. Although in an emergency he took over, but still, because the guy who was the commanding officer was I always kind of hated the term 90-day wonder, which is what people went through officer candidate school were, because when I went through officer candidate school, it was about 130 days. But you know, but the point of it is that he was on PCs, but he wasn't involved theoretically with the operation of them. He was mostly making sure that the they were corvettes. That's what they were. Yeah, they were free French corvettes, and of course there was the Vichy government and all that kind of jazz. And so it was somewhat. Actually, the British bombed the French fleet after France fell, which so it was a good question. Which side these guys are on. I mean, it wasn't a simple question. And actually, one of the interesting things that happened to the PCs that served in the Atlantic is that they were after France was recaptured, so to speak, the PCs were turned over to the French. Actually, the PC 556, I happen to know, became the it was named by the French the Commodore, and served as the French, whatever the French had. They were part of the French Navy, but it was only after. You know, I don't even know exactly at what moment the French were considered an ally again.
Well, you had it went in stages. I mean, once the Americans landed in North Africa at the end of '42, you had those Vichy colonies go over, and you had now large Free French forces. Oh, sure. Sure. At that point, and so the Americans and so the Free French were more powerful, but it's still not going to be until '44 that France is liberated.
Yeah. Well. One of the things too is that the PC boats. You were talking about D-Day and the invasion. The PC boats were the first picket line that was protecting the invasion fleet, so to speak, and some of those vessels were actually the French corvettes that had been that had served initially. Escorting U.S. vessels, actually along the east coast of the United States, but that was they were manned by French crews, and I don't know that the that none of the PCs, I mean, I don't know the fact, were actually, may have been French, they may have had French crews integrated into them, because they had a lot of experience in that kind of stuff. And there wasn't, you know, small vessels. I mean, yes, the corvettes were bigger than the PCs, but they were only 202 feet or something like that. So they were real small vessels. But the French had a lot of expertise in operating that kind of vessel because they had done it with us.
Did your father ever express any opinion of whether or not the French were reliable or capable?
Well, yeah, he did. He thought they were, and that that the Free French, who were manning the corvettes, were reliable, and that they, you know, should be integrated into our forces. And then afterwards, an awful lot of the convoys were actually reconstituted in Greenland after, you know, leaving various U.S. ports, and they were escorted from there to Greenland by PCs and French, French corvettes, and they proved to be reliable, yeah, they proved to be they really proved to be reliable.
Okay. All right. And did your father ever talk about any actual encounters with U-boats or things like
that?
that?
No. Actually, the most exciting thing that ever happened was that they were coming up from along the East Coast, and they got overtaken by a hurricane, and they lost somebody overseas. And like I said, my dad wasn't the commanding officer.
Don't touch the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. But he took over, did what they call a Williamson turn, which is you go back theoretically along the same track that you came on if you do a Williamson turn. Never mind how you do it, but it is something. And they picked the person up. And the way the story is told, and it still is told, when I was in officer candidate school it got told, that it was miraculous that it happened. And actually, it appeared in Ripley's Believe It or Not. So it was a pretty remarkable thing. And also it wasn't a matter of, they picked him up, like, you go alongside of him and pick him up. He actually got picked up by a wave again, and he wound up in the rigging, and some of his shipmates grabbed him, hauled him downstairs, down below. So, it was kind of a remarkable thing. Now, another thing about these PCs that was kind of interesting is that they had a 3-inch, well, in naval terms, the size of a artillery, except for 40s and 20s. Now, it doesn't go by millimeters. It goes by inches. And a 3-inch 50 is one with a 3-inch bore, and 50 times that is the length of the barrel. Right. So a 3-inch 50 is a 3-inch caliber with a 150-inch barrel. And they had that on the stern, and you can still find pictures of them. If you go online and you can go like PC 556, the PC 556 is a PC. There was an earlier one that set the class. The way the Navy does it is the first ship of a certain class is the name, right? Forever. It's that class of ship, and the first, but they basically all, although there were various things, they basically were all fitted with a 3-inch 50 in the stern, and a Beaufort gun, which was
40 millimeter.
Yeah. It's about 40 millimeters. Yeah, the Beaufort gun was actually a German gun that is actually the
company's Swedish.
Is it Swedish?
Bofors is Swedish. Yeah.
Oh, it is. Well, you know.
But we use their design.
Yeah. We use their design. It's like the 40 millimeters that you've seen in the. That's what a Bofors gun really is, and yeah, it is probably Swedish. Swedish. Well, actually, I don't mean to. The Bofors gun was also built by the Czechs too.
Well, lots of people built them.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I think Czechs would consider it theirs. I'm not going to get it. You know, is the Springfield a Mauser? Well, yes, no. It was copied after it, but yeah, and that's kind of how it worked, and they were. But yeah, I guess that was kind of a pretty miraculous savior or thing. Well, like I say, it appeared in Ripley's Believe It or Not at one time, and then can you believe that in a hurricane this guy got washed overboard and then washed back out? Which is kind of true, which is really true. They went back for him, but it wasn't like they just kept along and he was washed off by a wave and waved back. They turned around, he went down their old track, and he got washed back on. Yeah. And they grabbed him.
Now, did your father stay with the PCs through the war, or did he switch to something else before it was over?
No, he switched to, well, for most of the war, he stayed with PCs. But then he went to the Coast Guard Academy and taught gunnery and ballistics, which we would now call Newtonian physics. But that was gunnery and ballistics then, and actually, and the reason that was he was familiar with the area is that is where Electric Boat is located, which builds our submarines.
Right.
And the reason he was there was because I'm talking about the United States, wanted to know what it was like being in a submarine so we could fight them. And so he was there already. And therefore they said, and also one of his best friends, who was a submariner, was transferred to the Pacific, where he got the Congressional Medal of Honor, which is Red Conley, you know, fighting, you know, going after Japanese shipping, so to speak. But that's kind of how the combination is. So yes, he stayed with that. You know, he stayed with PCs, anti-submarine warfare type stuff for pretty much all the war. Although at the very end of the war, he was teaching gunnery and ballistics, which interestingly, one of the big secrets, military secrets of World War II, was the vicinity of target fuse, and that's a fuse that, if you're shooting it for a 40 millimeter, a lot of people think you're trying to hit it. You weren't trying to hit it. What you were trying to do, you're setting up flak. But what you'd have to do is you'd have to guess about when it would go off, unless you had a VT fuse,
right,
which would go off by itself.
Yeah. Actually, the original proximity fuse was developed in part by a fellow named Ralph Baldwin, who actually was from Grand Rapids.
Oh yeah! Oh sure! Oh yeah!
We have an interview with him in our collection somewhere.
The VT fuse was actually, but that was a military secret.
Yeah.
For a long time, that we had developed it, but the original purpose of it, because you couldn't hit a submarine that came up with a 3-inch 50. So very hard to hit. They're a very small silhouette. But if you could hit them with a VT, if you had VT fuses, you could keep them from using their deck gun. That was the theory. So actually, the original, as I understand it, the original impetus for the VT fuse was as an anti-submarine as an anti-submarine warfare weapon, although the Navy decided, hey, that would be a great anti-aircraft weapon. And then the Army decided, oh, that would be a great artillery weapon. And we kept it secret, like the Newark bomb site, until we started using it. So that's kind of how it happened.
Right. So how long did he wind up staying in Connecticut?
In Connecticut?
Yeah.
Well, until I was 1. I was born in 1946. Actually, I consider myself to be on the very edge of a great... I was born exactly 9 months after VJ Day, which was victory over Japan.
Right.
I was born exactly 9 months later. So I consider myself, although I guess that's when they talk about the boomer generation, they're talking about everybody was born in 1945. Actually, I was born 9 months after VJ Day, so I consider myself right on the edge.
Okay.
So,
all right. Now he goes on to a full career in the Coast Guard.
yes, yes.
All right. And now, as you're growing up, then your family is kind of following him to his different stations.
Right,
and
right.
assignments.
Well, actually, because he was still considered an expert in anti-submarine warfare. When we were stationed in Naples, Italy, from the time I was 1 until I was 8, and I don't know what his technical duties were, but he was basically a spy. We were concerned about what the Soviet Union was doing with their submarines, and they were also very concerned that the Soviet Union was developing nuclear submarines. Although a lot of people didn't know it, but for a long, long time after World War II, the majority of the submarine fleet of the Soviet Union were conventional submarines. A lot of people didn't know that. They always presumed they were all, everybody went to nuclear. Well, they didn't. And the first 3 that they launched were codenamed Hotel, Echo, and November. And they were called hens. And interestingly enough, when I went to officer candidate school, many years later, over 30 years later, they still called any iron current country submarine that was nuclear a hen. They used the term. I mean, it was just adopted, and it really came from the fact that the first 3 nuclear submarines had those code names, and it spelled hen, so they're still called hens. And you even, well, we can talk about that more when we talk about officer candidate school. But there's a game you play where you are in a simulator of a combat information center, CIC, of a DE or a destroyer, and they will tell you that you're going to encounter a hen, and that means that and that makes a difference of how you're going to proceed. But they will say that. I mean, they will still use that. That's just a term that's used all the time. It's used all the time, and it's just part of the parlance. I don't know what the parlance is now, but I know that in 1969, when I was in officer candidate school, that was the term.
Okay. Now, while he's in Naples, is your father basically on shore in a base, or is he?
Oh no. He's attached to the consulate, and he was technically. I don't know exactly what his duties were technically, but he had to go on ships a lot, and he would often take me along as a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old or something, and I would meet the captain of the Constitution, or the Constitution of the Independence, or the Constitution of one of the 4 aces, which were American export lines, ships that went back and forth in the Atlantic and stuff like that. And when the submarines were launched, the hens were launched, the 3 of them, they went to, they had a conference in England, and my dad was temporarily stationed in England to talk about how they were going to do it. And interestingly enough, the way they decided to do it is they put microphones, which I don't know if they still do or not, but because these things were noisy and sounded all different, they could say what submarine was where, or they did the best they could. Let's put it that way. Sometimes they would lose track of one or something, but basically that's what that's what they did. And even though when I went to officer candidate school, we had things like ASROC, which starts out as a rocket and then becomes a torpedo and goes after submarines and stuff like that. Part of the thing we still used a lot was those microphones that to know where they were.
Right.
And we had 45 minutes to kill them because they didn't have the ability to launch from underwater, but to get on deck and to launch from deck, the process took about 45 minutes. So we had 45 minutes to destroy them, theoretically, and we used all kinds of stuff to do it. But that was the basic idea. And then of course nowadays I don't know what the heck they do because you can launch. They have the ability to launch from underwater and stuff.
Okay. So after the stint in Naples, where does he go next?
He went to the hospital because he was diagnosed as having Hodgkin's disease. It turned out it was tuberculosis, but they weren't smart enough in Italy to know that until he went to Johns Hopkins, and which is basically tuberculosis, and which he probably got by eating unpasteurized cheese in Italy, but that's another story. My mother also had TB. I didn't, which they never could figure out why I didn't, but I didn't. Maybe they both went out to dinner somewhere and ate unpasteurized. I don't know.
But by this time it was treatable.
Oh yeah. Sure. It was treatable, yeah, it was treatable. And the only thing they were surprised is that I didn't have it. There was no question that it would be treatable. I mean, it was, and it was. And after, I guess it was 6 months, my dad was released, and he became chief of personnel. And boy, this is really amazing. I can't believe it. I don't know what Coast Guard district that was. He was Boston.
Okay.
We lived in Marblehead, and he was the chief personnel. And yeah. So
how long were you there?
Well, no. Actually, he had 2 jobs when we were in Boston. First of all, he was commanding officer of one of the Treasury class cutters out of Boston, which was the Bibb, which is the second Secretary of the Treasury of the United States was BIBB, that's Bibb, and that's what it's named after. And that was a weather ship that used to. This was before they had all the sophisticated monster buoys they have now. So the ships would go out, they'd stay on station, and they had a balloon. They'd have weather people on board, and they would send up weather balloons and make weather observations and and they would send that information to Italy, which kind of, or not to Italy, but to Europe, which is kind of interesting in it because they would like to know what's coming.
Right.
So That's so he did that, was commanding officer of the Bibb for 2 years, and then became chief of personnel, which was an office job, so to speak. After that, and so that was, how he spent a certain amount of his career. His last assignment was chief of operations, which is kind of like the #2 guy in the district. And operations is ships and planes and all that kind of stuff. And he had that position when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, which was kind of interesting.
And where was he based at that point?
New Orleans.
Okay.
And one of the things, there was a thing called the radio station, which had all kinds of high-powered transmitters and stuff. That was in, I think it was St. Bernard Parish, which was well within the range of the missiles from Cuba, but they had to secure that because the Navy really wanted that, or the Armed Forces really wanted that. Let's put it that way. And it was technically the Coast Guard radio station,
right?
But it was used by all the Armed Forces to communicate with all the ships in the Atlantic and and our vessels and stations and stuff. And I knew it as a teenager, the radio station,
right.
And it was had all kinds of high-powered antennas and stuff, and jazz jazz like that. And I don't know if it still exists or not. When the hurricanes, I forget what the big hurricane was, because I was a volunteer for the Red Cross at that point in time, and I was sent down with a group of 5 other volunteers to provide food to first responders. Imagine that. First responders have to eat too. How about that? So, but that's what we did. And one of the reasons that I was chosen to go is I knew, when they were talking about the 9th Ward or Airline Highway, I knew. I mean, we used to live there. I was aware of it. I wasn't completely out of my element, but I knew what that was, and so that was certainly one of the reasons. I'd like to think because I was such an outstanding volunteer, but in reality,
so you're now talking about sort of the relative reason, like Katrina, the relative.
Yeah.
As an adult.
What happens is kind of interesting in the Red Cross too, is that the local Red Cross, with help from the national, calls the shots and what they need help with. And when we flew down, we didn't know what we were going to do. But the local Red Cross said, you're going to run a food service for first responders, which is what we did. And where it was going to be, and when they said it was down Airline Highway or whatever it was, I knew exactly where it was. I mean, I'd been a teenager there, and I learned to drive there, and you tend to learn that kind of stuff.
Okay, so we kind of so that's sort of your father's career, because he retires in '65.
Sure.
Okay, now let's kind of switch over here to
me.
So where did you actually go to high school?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, I went to lots of schools.
Yeah.
And did I go to high school in Marblehead, Massachusetts, or New Orleans, Louisiana? I graduated from high school in New Orleans, Louisiana. and I was a good student. Went to the University of Michigan.
Okay, so why'd you wind up in Michigan?
You know, it's kind of funny because I was taking the SATs, and lo and behold, when you took the SATs, you had to write down 3 places where you want your SATs to go.
Yep.
And I had watched the night before Hootenanny. There was a show.
Mm-hmm.
It was from Ann Arbor, Michigan. So I knew where the University of Michigan was.
Okay.
So I put it down.
Mm-hmm.
And then they accepted me. The other thing is, geez, I got accepted by the University of Michigan. It's in some place called Ann Arbor, Michigan. I didn't know what it was, but they had neat football helmets. I want to tell you, I thought their football helmets were great. Mm-hmm. So that's why I went to the University of Michigan, to be perfectly honest with you. Oh, no, I did a study in the library, and I realized how academically excellent they were, and made, no, that wasn't how it happened at all. They had great football helmets, and I had seen them on Hootenanny the night before. And that's why I went there.
Okay.
So that's it.
So when do you start at Michigan?
1965.
Okay.
And when I went there, that's when the Bay of Tonkin thing happened.
Which is Tonkin is fall '64. Yeah.
Is kind of how we got involved in the Vietnam War.
Yep.
I was really a rock-draped Republican. One of the things is that my parents over their bed had 2 sayings. One was, I dreamt that life was beauty, and I awoke to realize life is duty. But that was that was kind of my mindset. To make a long story short, over the next 4 years, I had a 180-degree swing. I was very liberal, I was very liberal. I also met a Michigan girl who was also very liberal, who I was told I didn't have a chance with because she was dating a guy in law school who also became a West Michigan judge.
Mm-hmm.
And so we became an item. Yes, I lived with her for 3 years without benefit of marriage. Mm-hmm. But then as soon as I was commissioned, we were married, and we've been married for 48 years. Right. So if there isn't ever a reckoning, I'm going to put the 3 years up against the 48 and said, you know, I made it good. So anyway, but that's kind of how I wound up at Michigan, stayed at Michigan, and.
Right. Now, of course, during that time, now you've got a draft deferment because you're in college.
Right, a 2S, which was kind of interesting, because one of the things that happened with all the males was you'd get letters from your draft board. I mean, every month it seemed like you were getting 2S's, and a 2S was only good for undergraduate.
Right.
Once you had your degree, theoretically you were draftable.
Mm-hmm.
But then the government figured out that's kind of stupid because, you know, we want people to have advanced degrees. So they developed a program, and the University of Michigan administered it, but I don't think it ever counted, where you'd actually go and take a test to see if you had the academic credentials or to go on.
Right.
But I don't think that ever counted. I mean, you took the test, and I remember going down to Angel Hall and taking the test, but after they did it, I think they decided it was unconstitutional or some darn thing. I don't know what it was.
Yeah. There wasn't really a standard graduate school deferment at that stage. There had been one earlier before Vietnam.
Right, and there was, and the idea was, as I understood it, that this was going to, in a very objective way, develop people who deserve that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually the people who do the graduate records now, and developed the test. And I remember taking the test, and it's the same place. Caroline, I don't know if you used to teach preparation for the graduate records exam, and went there in, well, it's in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Never mind where, but it's in New Jersey, and they were the same people. It's the same. And I also had occasion to take the graduate records test later, and although they weren't giving deferments for that.
Yep.
There were no deferment. There were no graduate deferments. But as soon as you got the graduate degree, it was like, bam, you were prime. Actually, one of my roommates happened to. They were going to grad school at Michigan, and they got drafted. Kim got drafted, and he actually refused induction, and they were prosecuting him. Then, when he went in for his court date, they decided not to, because I don't know if it's because the Pentagon Papers got out or whatever, but they decided not to, and he remained a friend. He became the head of the bureau for Associated Press in Lansing. By the way, covered the University of Michigan football games and the races down at Michigan International. He covered it for them, and yeah, we were friends for a long time. He got MS and passed away a few years ago, but yeah, he did. We had four of us who were together. Vaughn just gave up, and he was pre-med and wound up in a Jolly Green Giant in Vietnam and got killed. The Jolly Green Giant was a
large helicopter.
It was a large helicopter that stabilized people who'd been wounded, and then took them to a hospital.
Right.
And another one. This is just a freak. He happened to be in West Michigan. He was later the executor of Second Harvest Gleaners. He enlisted in the Marine Corps, and the reason he did it, I never really understood it. He enlisted in the Marine Corps because he figured if you were going to work for peace, you had to be where the action was. He also got a medal. Well, he wouldn't carry a gun, so he got a medal for being a radio man.
Okay.
And he also was carry dispatches. He had a dispatch pouch, and he got a medal for keeping his unit from being wiped out by friendly fire. By doing, I don't know, by doing something. He also, just as an aside, was in a part of Vietnam that they called Arizona, because they had used so much Agent Orange that it was like a desert. And he died of a type of cancer that's associated with exposure to Agent Orange just a few years ago, actually.
All right. We're going to steer back to you. During the time when you were on campus, Michigan was a place where there was a lot of anti-war activism.
Oh, there sure. Yes, there was. Yes, there was. As a matter of fact, one of the things is that, and I was also dating a woman who was very much into that. And we were sitting along South U, and he called himself Secretary of Defense of the Rainbow People's Party, which was Well, the MC-5 was their funding source. I don't know if they, MC-5 was a rock group.
Okay.
Kick Out the Jams was their big thing. Love is Like a Ramblin' Rose, like that. But anyway, they, Pun Palamundan is who it was, came up to us and said, guys, this isn't a good place to be. Now, whether he was coming to us because he knew us, we knew him, but whether he knew us or not, I don't know to this day. But he said, there's going to be real trouble here. And that's when, so we said, I know what he's talking about. The National Guard marched down South U to the the engineering arch, which is the entrance to the campus of U of M, and a bunch of activists were there, and the president of the University of Michigan came out and stood between them and told the National Guard that not to set foot on campus, and told the students not to confront the National Guard. And my friend Kim, who was a journalism student, is out there with his reel-to-reel, recording the whole thing. And we were off. If you're familiar with the campus at Michigan, then it was the Physiastro. The Physiastro. It's off to the side, physics and astronomy building. We were off to the side, and we were watching all this. And then when Caroline and I went back to her apartment, we went down across from the Lockquad. There were buses and buses and buses of National Guard soldiers. I don't know if they were for reinforcements. I don't know why. They looked at us, we looked at them, went to our apartment, and that was it. I mean, you know, I'm not telling you any more of that. But anyway, we were, we were really highly involved. Actually, there was a place called, and it still exists, called, it was a coffee house, an Episcopal coffee house. They used to do an Episcopal service, and then afterwards would show anti-war movies. And that's where Caroline and I met, and we used to go all the time, and it's called Canterbury House.
All right.
It still exists. I don't know what their political affiliation is now or anything, but it still exists. And it was a Episcopal sponsored program.
Right.
And they used to have, they'd have Episcopal service. They wouldn't have hosts. I come from a Catholic background. They would actually have bread, and we knew the person who baked the bread. And she would say, she passed the bread out, Jesus is kind of yeasty today, or something. And but that was it. Anyway, yeah, we were very much involved. Actually, one of the things that really struck me is that an awful lot of the people who were activists actually believed that society was going to turn around. I mean, I kind of wondered if it would. But it wasn't that it wouldn't. I mean, that it was, you know, I actually wondered. But they didn't wonder. They were positive it was going to. I mean, there was no doubt about it in their mind. It was gonna. And, yeah, we... Kim, like I say, got drafted and refused induction. Vaughn allowed himself to be drafted because of his medical training, worked for worked on a Jolly Green and got killed in Vietnam. My other roommate became eventually the executive director of Second Harvest Gleaners.
Right, you said that.
And he enlisted in the Marine Corps.
Right. Yeah, we've covered that one. Yeah.
And boy, I you know, I enlisted in the Coast Guard because, well, we all had reasons.
Yeah.
And like I say, I don't think I had the depth of political conviction that they did. But the thing that got me was, if I didn't go, somebody else went in my place. Really, I mean, that was the big motivating factor. And as a consequence, when I did become an officer in the Marine Inspection Office and stuff, and you know, I would always volunteer for the most dangerous stuff, because I said, no matter how dangerous it gets, nobody's shooting at me, you know, with evil intent, and that's what I did. Another interesting thing is that exactly 1 week after I was commissioned, I got married, and that was a big deal, because marriage was one of those, you know, well, it was almost like, if you're going to be in the conventional society, we're going to go all out. So that's what we did, and we got married. We got married in a church. We went the whole way, and you know, Caroline continued going to school. Eventually went to grad school at Wayne State. I know, but. And then got a job working in the psychology department at Grand Valley State University, and that's kind of how it all happened.
Okay. Now to go back to you, so in what year now do you graduate from college and go into the Coast Guard?
Well, I graduated in 1969.
Right.
I went into the Coast Guard into the Coast Guard. There's a enlisted in the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard was enlisting people so that they'd have them, so to speak. They couldn't be drafted.
Right.
I started officer candidate school that next August and graduated in January. So that's
now,
kind of the timeline.
My
for
understanding is that at the time, it wasn't always easy to get into the Coast Guard.
Oh no,
a lot of people wanted to get in to avoid being sent to Vietnam.
Yeah, exactly, and also one of the helicopter pilots, who was a Coast Guard helicopter pilot, had been a Huey pilot in Vietnam, and had joined the Coast Guard to get out of being a Huey pilot. No, really. And he was, you know, that was it. I mean, he really did. The reason I got in is that what happened was you took an exam, and I remember it was one of those exams that starts easy and winds up getting really hard. And I remember the first one was they show you a nail, a screw, and a hammer, and say which two go together, you know, and at the last one was one of those things where, you know, you've got 4 people on an island, and they tell you what the 4 people, and so and so can't be with so and so, and so. How many trips does it take? You know, so it gets harder.
Right.
And you take that. Then you also get an exam, and one of the quadrants, because I've sat on one of these committees, is what they call military adaptability, and I'm sure because of my dad's career, I maxed out on that. Other things are, you know, they ask you questions, you know, psychological questions, and thus and so, and this and that, and you get, but I guess my scores were high enough overall to get in. So I did. I want to tell you, our officer candidates class had some pretty. My roommate went to Columbia. That's just Ivy League. My other roommate went to Cornell, was ABD. And for his first assignment was the Coast Guard Academy, where he taught physics. Okay, and We also had the Senator Pell's son was in my officer candidate's class. The captain of the USC football team was in our class. Just pretty rarefied company.
Right.
And then an awful lot of the people in my officer candidate class were like chiefs who had done well in it, and they were based on that. It was like a company with 4 platoons, and we had 104 people. So we had 26 people in a platoon.
So what's the training like?
Well, the training is interesting. The training is really interesting. I have to admit, first of all, it's very rigorous. You start out in the morning doing calisthenics, and then you got a 2-mile run. Then you take a shower and fall out for inspection as a whole company, and you get inspected. Then you march off to breakfast. Then every place you go, you either have to run or march. Okay? And if you're running and you pass a group marching of 4 or more, you ask permission to join the thing, and you march to wherever hopefully they're going where you want to go, and then if they go past where you want to go, you ask permission to the guy in charge to fall out, and you do. Other interesting things is that you play the Coast Guard's war mission is anti-submarine warfare still. They have a simulator, which is basically a combat information center for a DE or a DD, and you fight a submarine. And you do it all day, very realistically, and it's amazing how fast the day goes. Other things you do is there's a smokehouse. You can't see anything. You wear fighting gear, including a oxygen mask or whatever, a rebreather, or whatever it is, and you walk in with a hose. You're fighting. You can't see anything until you walk into the fire. Then you take 2 steps back with your hose and give it a blast of the hose over the fire, which it turns into steam and puts out the fire. There are also people around, I guess. You can't see them, but you do all kinds of it. You shoot the .45. You go down the naval weapons and shoot the 5-inch .34, which is the heavy piece of artillery on a high endurance cutter. Another thing, you march around. Every platoon has a 55-gallon drum filled with delicate electronic gear, so you can't roll it or anything. You got to have that with you at all times. You pass that around, but then again, if you do anything, so long as you do it in a military manner, you can do it. For example, our platoon, there's 26 guys marching along. You can do we had a right flank, left flank, double to a rear with a slight hesitation hut. You can imagine what that looks like. It's kind of cool. But so long as you did it in a military manner, you could do it. You did all kinds of things. I mean, you did. There was a W3 warrant who taught readiness, which was weapons, which basically any weapon from a .45 to a 5-inch .34, he taught you how to do it. Interestingly enough, he knew, he was a friend, he was only a 19-year-old striker. A striker is someone who is applying for something. When my dad did the thing with picking a guy up.
Yeah.
Who knew him?
Okay.
Who knew the guy? So he knew the story. There are a lot of stories. The Coast Guard's tough, and one of the stories they always tell is, you know, how tough your first exec was, at your first unit, and one exec was so tough that when a guy was convicted of murder, who was a rum runner, was convicted of murder, politically they couldn't execute him. No one would sign the death warrant or whatever he had to do. So supposedly he went down with a bunch of guys under arms, took the guy, took him to a lifeboat station and hung him. That's how tough he was. I don't know if that guy ever existed, but that was a story. I mean, you know, so there are stories like that.
Because the other piece I want to ask about with the training, I mean, you spend, if you're Coast Guard, you're in the water, you can wind up in the water, you do water rescues. Did they do a lot of that stuff with you?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. One of the things that, with 83 footers, you would maneuver an 83 footer around, and they would grade you on how well you did. So you did a lot of stuff. There was also an ex river icebreaker called the Cuyahoga, which was like, I don't know, 200 feet. I don't know. I mean, it was a small ship, which you'd go out on and do things. And depending on how well you did with maneuvering the 83-footer, somebody in your platoon got to dock the ship. I got that honor. Thank you. Yeah, so we did a fair amount of that too. And we also had, you know, a room where you've got power tools and lumber and all that kind of stuff. And the guy said, "There's this big crack in the hull right here," and the guy would show you where it was, and you would build a water break, you know. So you did an awful lot of that kind of stuff too, and you marched a ton. You did the manual of arms all the time. And the first time you do it, after 1 week they tell you how terrible you are, and then after you've done it just before graduation, tell you how great you are, and that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, you know, so you get and the manual, you do the manual of arms. I mean, with a World War II
an M1 rifle.
M1 rifle, yeah. I mean, so it's heavy. The M1 rifle's heavy. You know, I kind of laugh when they have like at Granville. I don't know if Granville even has this. You know, they're out there with this balsa wood, and they're flipping it around doing all this. Well, man, I want to tell you, you can't do that with an M1. I mean, you just can't. But you do, you know, right shoulder, left shoulder, right, you know, present arms, and you know this and that kind of stuff a lot.
So now you get through your 130 days or training.
Yeah.
Okay. Now what do you do?
Well, you choose what you want, and everybody was really disappointed in me because what I wanted to do is I wanted the Marine Inspection Office in Detroit. Why? Because my girl was going to the University of Michigan. Detroit is close. So, although they closed Selfridge Air Force Base, so they had a lot of bachelor officers' quarters. So but you could get, you know, if you were married, you could stay married and you get BOQ, I think was $152 a month. You could, which was supposed to what the cost of setting up household, which I think our rent was $150 a month. But anyway, so yeah, you know, so basically what happened then is you basically put down what your choices were, and mine were God, I don't even remember what the name of the buoy snatcher was in Detroit. That was my number. Marine Inspection Office was my number 1. The buoy snatcher was my number 2, and the Mackinac, was my number 3. I remember, you want to be working at Marine Inspection Office? Well, yeah. and that was not particularly good. But like I said, we had the national champion surfer, which apparently had been in Wide World of Sports. Called him Surfing Sam Sarr. He got captain of the port Honolulu or something.
Okay.
So we went, oh, and that kind of stuff. And what you didn't want to do, and the thing about that is that if you got a ship or something, you pretty much stayed on that. If you got a captain of the port, you could wind up in French frigate shoals, which is terrible duty. The commanding officer is typically a JG. It's a Loran station in the middle of the Pacific, in the middle of nowhere. And that's it. That's all you got. Yeah, it's you and 10 guys, and you run a Loran station. That's all you do. And that was the worst you could possibly.
But you got yours. So you got your.
Yeah, because no one wanted it. So they thought that was great. I mean, whoever was making the assignments must have thought, oh, gee, that's great. Somebody wants it. So
your colleagues thought you were crazy, but
yeah.
People running the place are perfectly happy to have you.
Yes. But and when you say colleagues, it wasn't my fellow officer candidates.
Okay.
It was the
faculty.
Yeah, well, the
people teach training you.
Yeah. They were all JGs pretty much, except for the commanding officer was a commander, and they were all JGs or lieutenants, and and they thought that was stupid. I mean, that was really dumb, but it wasn't dumb to me. And yes, they were perfectly happy. I got the position of senior investigating officer, which is, I guess, a plum, because I could write, basically. And it was. And also another thing that I did, which made me pretty popular, is I had the idea that somebody was going. The idea if I don't get in the military, somebody's kind of that's in the back of my mind somewhere. So I was always volunteering for the more dangerous things. And like being to, for example, in one case, there was a tug stuck in the ice in the Detroit River, and they evacuated the crew except for the chief engineer and the captain, and put on the marine inspector. I volunteered for that, but it was sinking, and I figured out why, and we took care of it. But I was always doing stuff like that.
Okay. And what were the basics of the job?
The basics a senior investigating officer to investigate any event that happened in a federally navigable waterway, aka the Detroit River, which involved a significant loss of property or loss of life. And then we also have an assignment. They wanted to, for some reason, they wanted to get an idea of how much drinking had to do with boating accidents. So we also had certain accidents that we were instructed to investigate. And the basic idea was to see if alcohol had been involved, or theoretically there were people called China coasters who during the Vietnam War had signed up on a ship. On board, had gotten off before the ship came back to a U.S. port where there was a marine inspection officer, and would and you know, and the ship would come back, or a ship would come back, and they'd sign back on. They had experience, so they were, it was good. But so what you do is that you would have a hearing, and you'd put the guy's seaman's card or license or whatever it was on the table. In other words, the idea is he isn't being prosecuted. His ability to hold a seaman's card, or that is what it is. And you know, this guy might have 20 instances of abandonment. So you'd take a seaman's card and pay him $120,000 for back pay that he'd never gotten because they would pay off at the end of the voyage. So, you know, that was, and those people were called China coasters, and they existed. Actually, they were considered by an awful lot of the people, you know, if they needed a third assistant engineer, they knew they could find one. You know, they could, and it would be some China coaster and they would go to some place where there wasn't a marine inspection office and advertise for the position, and they get an applicant, and the guy'd be qualified. He'd have a license as an engineer or something, you know.
So you were trying to kind of take away the license, essentially.
Yeah. You would take away the license, but you know, some penalty, because back then, $120,000 was a lot of money. Yeah. But you know, now he had earned that money, even though he had abandoned the ship. He had earned that money, so it was just, so you take away his license, and he wouldn't fight it. I mean, why is he going to fight it? What's he going to fight it for? And although one person did one time, but that's another story. Typically, they would not fight it. You take away the license. There'd be a hearing examiner there. A hearing examiner is a judge, and you'd pay him he'd make sure you paid him, and you gave him the money, and that was it.
Okay.
The whole thing would take 15 minutes, but it was technically a hearing to take away this guy's license or his seaman's card or whatever.
So then he could not continue to do this.
No, he couldn't continue. No, he was done.
Yeah.
Typically, it was a retirement thing, but he could certainly work in a body shop or something. I mean, you know, he just couldn't work. I had a seaman's card when I was, you know, when I was 18 in New Orleans, and I actually used it before I went to U of M in that summer. And I worked on a barge, and the barge went from New Orleans to Corpus Christi, and we were just transporting gasoline, and I used it. I mean, you know, you got to have it. I mean, you like you probably couldn't, you know, walk on and sign on a ship. You got to have a seaman's card. It's not a big deal to get a seaman's card. It just takes a while. It's like getting a passport, to be perfectly honest with you. But a license, you do have to take an exam, well, actually, after my dad left the Coast Guard, retired from the Coast Guard, he got a job at New York State Maritime College, and he was the backup captain for the Empire State, which is a training ship that goes up and does a European cruise. It just so happens the next year, the guy who was the captain had a mild heart attack and had to retire. So for one year, he was actually the master of the Empire State. But then he got back and got the same physical, and they discovered he had cancer. So he lost that job, but then retired, okay. And he eventually passed away because of the cancer, and you know, just not anything to do with service, or maybe it was. I don't know.
Yeah, and it was what they ate in Italy. Kind of go back into your story here. So you've gotten yourself planted in Detroit, and you're doing this marine inspection work now. Did you have to get any specialized training for that? Did they send you anywhere else?
Sure. You had to go to Merchant Marine Safety School, and you received training. Interesting enough, with the training, we also got training along with some people from the South Vietnamese Navy, who also got it. But it was basically training. You know what the regulations were. And in some ways, that training got me in trouble when I was doing it, because part of the job was to inspect U.S. vessels. And one was the Robert S. McNamara, and that baby was in a really rough shape. And I called Captain Brewer and I said, look, you'd have a book where you'd write the, and I said, I filled up this book and I've only been in one compartment. And he said, okay, I'll be down. But the thing I did is they said in those regulations, you take their certificate. Well, what I didn't know is that in winter layup, you didn't physically take the certificate. I took it right off the wall. Matter of fact, I still have it. Okay, but you didn't do that. I mean, that's Ford Motor Company. You don't, so I don't trust them that they're not going to sneak off with it. Robert S. No, you just don't do that. But anyway, I got yes, and I was known as the Little Admiral because I had taken the certificate, and they actually wound up. Captain Brewer came down, went into one tank. A ship has tanks. And said, are the other tanks this bad? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, fine. So there were 4 inspectors who came from Washington, all captains, all full birds. And they inspected it and said, they talked to the higher ups and anyway, they scrapped the ship rather than repair it, because it was bad. I mean, it really was bad.
Now this is a merchant vessel?
Yeah. It's a well, Ford then, and I don't know if they do now. Ford used to have ships. We actually took a cruise on one of them that used to go to Minnesota. Pick up a load of taconite, bring it back to the Rouge plant, and they turn, along with coal and limestone, make steel.
Okay.
And they had a whole fleet of ships. And we inspected them. And the McNamara was a little coal ship that would go down to Toledo, get coal, bring it up to the Rouge plant, get unloaded, and it was pretty old and rickety, and it was the Robert S. McNamara, which I thought was kind of ironic. But anyway, that was the name of it, and I still have that certificate in my As a matter of fact,
they did make you put it back. They scrapped the ship, I guess, so they never needed it back.
Oh no! And not only did they not need it back, but after I had done it, and please don't do that anymore. I asked Captain Brewer, the commanding officer, if he wanted it, if I should bring it back, and he said, "No, keep it." So I kept it. but no, and I was called. I was referred to. I understand as the Little Admiral around the Rouge plant, which is fine. I mean, it wasn't like they did what they were supposed to do, but I understand that behind my back they called me the Little Admiral because I had done that. But
you mentioned that you would kind of take on assignments that were more dangerous than usual. You had the one on the boat on the river.
Yeah, on the river. Yeah. I used to. Sometimes you would have you'd have to charge a person who had been involved with a physical assault typically, and this isn't a matter, this is, a lot of people do not realize that there's a large Arab population in Detroit. And typically they're Arabs, and somebody had told, let's say a second assistant engineer had told, had said, "You son of a bitch, do this." And the guy had taken offense because he didn't do that in their culture, and would hit him over the head with a hatch clamp or something. So the guy had been involved in a serious, so you got to go down, and you got to find him and charge him. And going around Detroit, that was considered, you didn't want to do that. As a matter of fact, I got in trouble with Captain Brewer because he used to go alone. Although I think he kind of respected it at the same level. You know, go alone in these places, and to charge this guy. And I guess, you know, so you're charging a guy who had attempted murder, you know, with something. But he did it on a ship, you know. So what you would do is you take away his seaman's card, make sure he never could work on a ship again, and then you turn it over to the appropriate authorities, who wouldn't want to take it generally, but you would. But that was considered a dangerous assignment if you had something like that. This may not sound dangerous, but it really was. Is sometimes you'd have to charge somebody on a ship that didn't want to stop, because that's expensive. So you go out in a 40 boat, you put down a rope ladder, you'd hop on and go up and charge the guy, come down. If you're on a big ship alongside your boat's going up and down and all that, that's pretty dangerous. I mean, you could fall off that ladder. It doesn't sound like it's, believe me, it's harder than it seems. It's tougher than it seems. You could, you know, so it's stuff like that. And, you know, I always figured, myself, that this is a damn sight safer than being in combat. And, you know, I got to go home every night, so to speak. Well, I didn't get to go home every night, but pretty much. And so I would always say that I can do that. And I didn't think that much about it. Like I said, I was almost 50 years ago, and over, you know, a little less than 50 years and more than 50 pounds ago. But I used to do that stuff, and it never really frightened me as far as physical harm was concerned. You know, and when I charged these guys, you know, that I'd find them and charge them, typically they were as meek as a mouse. I mean, no one ever said, "Boy, if you come at me with that, you know, I'm going to kill you," or something. I mean, it never ever happened. And one time, I was doing something like that, and there was a woman there in a rubber suit. And I came back to the office, and I was thinking, how come that woman was in a rubber suit? And they go, well, you're older. Well, I'm 72 now, and I still don't know why she was in a damn rubber suit. but anyway, it's stuff like that, you know. And it just never, I just never thought it was that dangerous. And I wouldn't do it now. But I just didn't think it was that dangerous. And you know, some of the places you'd go, I'd be stepping over the drunks and that kind of stuff, and they were saying, I shouldn't be there, you know, because I used to have to wear, you wore civilian clothes, you didn't wear a uniform.
Okay.
And you'd be stepping over drunks and drug addicts and stuff, and were the places you'd go to find this person. One of the things that was really remarkable too, sometimes the address you'd get would be a bar. I'd go up to the bar and I'd tell the bartender, I'm Ernest Cascini, I'm a Coast Guard officer, I want to charge this guy, and this is the address he gave. Typically he'd be there. That's the amazing thing. You know, 9 times out of 10 he'd be there. and like I say, I never ran into somebody who was sometimes verbally they'd be antagonistic to some extent, but not physically aggressive ever. I don't ever recall ever doing that. Another thing, one of the things about Detroit police, they would be real good about coming on board with you or something if it was a question whether it was it was a murder or something. But a place like up north or something, they weren't that happy about doing that. I mean, a lot of times the local police force, they were very happy with you doing it and sending on your investigation, and they'd start one for them, but they weren't nearly as cooperative as the Detroit authorities by any stretch. I mean, but I didn't think that much about it, to be perfectly honest with you, because my experience, maybe the first time or something, but my experience were always, that the guy was not physically aggressive. I didn't feel that my life. I suppose, as I'm stepping over drunks or drug addicts or whatever they are, and sleeping in the hallway of a flop house somewhere or something, I suppose that somebody could have hit me over the head to steal my wallet or something. I suppose, but I never thought of it that way. I presumed that they wouldn't. Maybe they thought I was a cop, and it's a good thing not. To do that. But I never. But I would do things like that. There are probably some other things I'm not thinking about, but I would volunteer to do it.
Now, did you have sort of large-scale accidents or other problems that you did investigate?
Oh, sure. We had under the Blue Water Bridge, which is around Port Huron, a ship. They lost. The currents under the Blue Water Bridge are pretty wicked, and the U.S. ship lost control, and a Canadian ship T-boned them, and the ship sunk. And so that's about as big as it could get as far as we were concerned, the loss. And all the crew was picked up by the theoretically you could pick up a pilot there if you were a salty. The guy who ran the pilot shuttle, when he heard there's just before a collision like that, the ship gives you 5 blasts. He heard that and knew it was going to be a collision. He got his boat out there and got the whole crew off. He got the life-saving medal for it, by the way. But I mean, and this was wintertime. It would not have been good to have people in the water. Lots of reasons not. But he actually came up while the U.S. ship was going down. And actually, the Canadian ship, in a way, was not at fault. Although, one of the things, if you do hit a T-bone a ship, you're not supposed to back out. You're supposed to stay there. He didn't. He backed out.
And you back out, and then that's going to open up the big gap in the hull, and
it's going to sink. Yeah, and that actually happened. Another thing is that when the ship sank in the channel, the Army Corps of Engineers got a hold of it and pulled it up to the shore and then righted it. Well, when they had righted it, and there's still a lot of tension on these cables, they wanted to, because they had an investigation of it, obviously, Department of Transportation investigation, and they wanted some stuff like what was the position of the the telegraph. Telegraph's a thing you use on a ship that says if you want to what you want the engine to do. You want to go half ahead. You know, that's called an engine room telegraph. They want to know that, and then a few other things like that. And it just turns out the reason the captain wasn't on the bridge, which he should have been, supposedly he had to go to the bathroom. It's legalism. I don't care if you did or not. But that, you know, we had to get the log, because the reason he wasn't on the bridge is because he hadn't gotten any sleep the night before, because he had been in Cleveland when the storm came through, and he was parting lines, so he was up all night, so to speak. I mean, parting lines because windy, lines pop. So you write that down in the log, you know. So they wanted the log. You think, oh, why the hell do they want the log? Did they log the collision? No, but did the night before, did it get put in the? It was significant, and so yeah. I had to find the log. I had to see what the position were, the things. But these cables are under a lot of pressure. And theoretically, they could have snapped and the ship is rolled over, and I'm inside of it. But I didn't. I mean, I asked the guy who said that the cable's going to hold, because we had a question. He wasn't. He said, yeah, pretty much. I mean, you know, they should. And I said, is it safe for me to go in? And he said, probably. No, he said probably. I remember it to this day. But I did stuff like that, and you know, so I had the log, which indicated that, which had been logged, that it had happened. I knew what the position of the engine room telegraph was, and some other things too. I don't even remember what they were. But I, you know, I went on the bridge and grabbed the stuff, and you know, went down the hull. Actually, one of the things they hadn't done yet that I think they hadn't put the maximum tension they thought they could to get the ship in as far as they could. It was pretty much there, but not quite all they could. So it wasn't, there was a certain safety factor involved. It wasn't like at the point of, you know. And to be honest with you, when they winched it in more or pulled it in more, I don't know if I would have gone on the bridge then. But seeing as how, you know, hell, the guy's a colonel, he ought to know. But you know, maybe it would be fair to say I was too dumb to know what the real danger was.
Okay. Now, are there other particular incidents or memories from that active duty period that stand out for you?
Yeah, there is one. Caroline was a bit of a flower child. She's, you know, she still to this day, she collected signatures for what proposition, this proposition about gerrymandering, and she collected, I don't know, 700 or something. And, you know, it's just stuff like that. Yeah. So she also did macrame. That macrame is a fancy stuff. Well, and I was the little admiral. So we had a trip, just an orientation trip, on one of the big Ford ships to go up to Duluth and back. The master was probably the most right-wing Republican you can imagine. I mean, he used to, after they would load taconite, it winds up being like a big marble. If it was Wednesday and he was going back to the engineer, and there was still some taconite, he would have the guys break out the hose and wash off the taconite so he could walk down that side. I mean, he was, you know. So he didn't like me very much. But Caroline looked at his stuff and said, "Is that your knot work?" And he said, "Yes." and you, oh, it's a, I don't know what it was, something another half hitch or whatever it is. She knew.
Yeah.
And they became friends. No, but I think the point of it is, here is about the most liberal person you can imagine. Here is the most conservative person you can imagine. And they became friends?
Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Adnan Scalia, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I suppose. Yeah, exactly. And you wouldn't think that. And you know, even today when they talk about, you know, common ground, I think about that. It's really true. There is common ground. I mean, you might not know what it is, you know, that kind of stuff, but there's common ground. And for a while, not anymore, they used to correspond, you know, for, you know, vendors to get the string. It's not string.
Yeah.
Caroline would actually go nuts if I said called it string, but that's what it is. You know, you could get it from a certain vendor, and they, oh, have you tried this? And have you ever tried this and that and so and so? They would correspond. You know, can you imagine? And I remember that at one point in time we were coming into Duluth, and he was saying, you know, he invited me to look on the radar. I don't think he would have done that had he not had a friendship with Caroline. I don't think he would have done it. I mean, now I could be wrong. You know, you know, maybe he just wanted him to show me what they use, and because it was an orientation trip, we were supposed to, you know, we're supposed to see what it's all about. So, and you could, but you take your wife along too, and I did, and my partner did. So you know, it wasn't a, you know, an inspection, and I didn't think it wasn't, you know, it wasn't. We were going to see what's happening. Although one of the interesting things, they have hatch clamps on ships. Theoretically, they're supposed to tighten down all the hatch clamps. Well, it's manual work. It's a lot of work. They do half of them. You know, as a matter of fact, I mean, nobody does all the things if the weather's good. As a matter of fact, I say batten down the hatches. That's what they mean.
Yeah.
But they don't put all the battens out. They didn't on my trip either. I mean, theoretically, I could have, but I wasn't going to do it. I mean, it just wasn't. I mean, you know, you know, if there had been something really blatant, I guess I could have, but I just wasn't going to.
Right.
And but I still think, you know, when they talk about, you know, really right-wing Republicans and really liberal Democrats finding common ground, you know, yeah, sure. I still think about that. Here were two people. You couldn't imagine a more right-wing or a more left-wing person, but still, they had something in common, and I think that was a tremendous lesson. Matter of fact, I think that's probably the most significant lesson that I ever learned, and from that my whole experience.
Okay.
So.
All right. So when do you get out of the Coast Guard?
When my term is up. Oh, that was another thing. If you weren't very good, you got out 3 months early. If you were good, you stayed the whole thing, which seemed like a but anyway, when my time was up, I got out.
So when was that?
That was in January of 1973.
Okay.
And I got out. Caroline got a position in the psychology department at Grand Valley. I got a position at Hope Network, although it was called Pine Rest. It was a division of Pine Rest Christian Hospital then, and you know, all that kind of jazz. And went up through the ranks pretty quick. Frankly, because our executive director liked military people, and I went up through the ranks and had a career there, and then basically left Hope to get an equivalent position, made a parallel move to Goodwill Industries, and that's my career. That was my career. So that's it.
Okay. Now, aside from kind of learning the lesson about common ground,
Yeah.
how do you think your time in the Coast Guard affected you, or what did you take out of it?
Oh, I don't know. You know, one of the things that amazes me to this day is how stupid I was. I mean, really. I just, when I say stupid, I mean, I didn't think things through completely. Like, when I took the certificate, you know, it wasn't even a matter of just taking it off. I mean, you know, we had to be unscrewed. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, it was you know, just stuff like that. I also got into a little bit of hot water when one of the jobs that I had at the Detroit diesel plant, which was to watch them, because you literally just had to watch them pressure test some pressure vessels, and then you put your stamp on them, and Coast Guard inspected by me, okay? Even though I did nothing. Well, there used to be a thing to bring the pressure vessels over, you know? And then they bring it over to the testing spot. But when it went around the corner, it's a little too, it had not been engineered too well, so a little too, and sometimes it would jump the track. And you'd have to wait about a half hour to have a skilled tradesman come over. The skilled tradesman didn't even bring the tool. He'd bring a pole that he'd get it from the guy I was working with and watching him and push it back in. I did that once, and you know, after doing about 60 of these, we got 2 more to go, and it jumps the track. And I pushed it back in. I essentially was guilty of taking skilled tradesman's job away from him. All right? Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, it was a congressional investigation. Inquiry, not an investigation. Inquiry. Just how did it happen? And Captain Brewer had me in, and he asked me what happened, and I told him. He said, okay. And that was the end of it, as far as I was concerned. And he just must have said, you know, some response, whatever it would be. And but I think that was pretty dumb if you think about it. I mean, you know, but I was thinking, I've been here all day. We're almost done. The thing jumps the track. The guy's gonna come in his little trike, you know, 3-wheeler. He's not gonna bring even the tool with him. He's gonna take the tool from the guy that I'm working with and push that thing back in the track. So, anyway, but it was, what do they call the person in a union who, the steward, had lodged a complaint, and it wound up going to Senator somebody. And it wasn't like I said, an investigation. It wasn't an investigation. It was just it was a complaint they wanted a response to. But when I think about it, you know, that's pretty dumb. You know, and you know, when I was thinking of places I would go, stepping over somebody who's drunk or high on drugs or something, that's stupid. Mm-hmm. You know, I could have gotten bonked on the head and my wallet taken, even if I was a policeman. It could have happened. Mm-hmm. So I just think about, I think about how when you're younger, you're pretty stupid sometimes. And I think that, to be honest with you, I mean, I'm not all for it. I think that's why the Marines and the Army likes to have, you know, soldiers who are 18 and 19 years old, because they do stupid things that a smarter person wouldn't do, I think. And the friend I had that was, he went into the Marines because he was also an author of a book. It's Peace Under Fire, is about his experiences in Vietnam. You can buy it too if you want, but it's just him, and it's just, you know, saying what he was doing. But he used to say that it's amazing how stupid some of the people were.
Young people, I think, your wife's a psychologist, young people, especially young men, have very different sense of what is dangerous.
Oh, yeah, they're going to live forever.
Yeah, yeah. And that is why you want young men in combat service.
Yeah, probably is. Probably is. And, but I think that when I think about some of the things I did, it just was kind of dumb. I mean, it was pretty, it all turned out all right. Mm-hmm. And it was true that, nobody ever hit me over the head or anything. I mean, and stuff. I mean, sometimes people would swear at me, but,
Did the experience just as an officer, did that help you as you were running different operations later on?
I think so.
Life?
I think so. One of the things that kind of helps is, I think I realized. Well, I was saying the God, I can't remember what his name was. The captain. But he was the only one who, when the Edmund Fitzgerald went down, who took his ship out of Whitefish Bay to look for survivors. Mm-hmm. Even though there was no chance of finding survivors, there wasn't any realistic chance. But of 13 ships that were in there, he was the only one who did. Mm-hmm. But, I think that just really shows me that, there's, I tend to be liberal too, okay? God, I just can't remember the guy's name, which is just amazing, because I thought that was indelibly described in my memory. But anyway,
it'll come back next week.
Yeah. But anyway, it just occurs, it just seems like one of the things I learned is that there's good things about everybody. Mm-hmm. And saying good things, that's already a judgment call on my part. There's things that I would consider that I'd be surprised at, that you wouldn't think of, and at least I wouldn't. Mm-hmm. And I think when you're supervising people and you, especially young people, and you wonder, why did you do that? Well, there's two things. One is, the person is young mm-hmm. and stupid. Mm-hmm. Not a bad person, but stupid. By the way, President of Grand Valley thinks I'm pretty stupid too, but that's another story. It's just, I think you tend to learn that, and when somebody screws up, they don't want to screw up. Very seldom does a person want to screw up. I have fired people because I hope we have intellectually challenged people who, for their own gratification, attempted to take sexual advantage of a person. I fired them on the spot. Mm-hmm. Okay, I've done that. But there's some other people who have done things that are just stupid. And I'm not giving them a second chance because I'm a good person. I'm giving them a second chance because you just need to appreciate it. Something that you would probably relate to. Caroline had a basketball player, a varsity basketball player, who interrupted her in a lecture. Okay? To say he wasn't going to be there on Thursday or something because they were having a game. But later, my son, who was a teenager at that time, admired him for playing basketball, and they became friends. So if she had just left it at, this guy's a jerk, mm-hmm. okay, but something to it. And he wasn't a particularly good student. and all that kind of jazz. So there's no halo effect, so to speak, and but you know, there's just different things. I mean, you know, that you know, and there's also a story. Sometimes people, you know, discipline somebody or write them up and don't even ask them for the whole story. Now, I've written people up, even after I've heard the story. I mean, I don't mean that, but they deserve a chance to do their story, you know, and you know, I think that I learned that.
Okay.
And you know, it's just, you know, you have a lot of responsibility. You're under a lot of pressure. They're under a lot of pressure. Sometimes, and you know, yeah, you screwed up. Yeah, I got to write you up for that. But you know, you always give a person a chance to have their say. Even the person I fired on the spot, you know, what he had done is he had given a note to a female client, and I put the note out and I said, "Can you explain this?" And he said, "No, I can't." And I said, "Well, you're done." Mm-hmm. You know, but the point is, even him. Mm-hmm. Although I don't know what he would have said that would have changed my mind, but even then he had the opportunity, yeah, you know, and to, you know, to have his say, and if there are extenuating circumstances or something, I can't think of an extenuating circumstance that would have changed my mind.
Yeah, well, there's other situations where there are, and you give people at least a chance and treat them the same.
Well, yeah, and you also, and like I say, you might write them up. You might write them up, which is kind of what in a not-for-profit is kind of the bad news, because it goes in their file and it follows them, and anytime you're considering a person for a promotion, you get their file and you get everything that's in it. So it isn't just nothing.
Yep.
But I think I really learned that, and well, I could go on and tell you about circumstances that made that very clear to me, but you know, it was, you know, that, yeah, the person must have made a mistake. Mm-hmm. The person made a mistake. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But
okay, all right. Well, I think that kind of brings us sort of back around here. It makes for a very different story from the ones I usually get.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
And really two stories in one, because we got enough about your father. So thank you very much for taking the time to come and share today.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank you.